Hello, everyone. It's really a great honor for me to present my research here. My name is Jiying, and I'm a second-year postdoctoral research fellow under the supervision of Dr. Rowe after obtaining my PhD degree last year in September. Today's presentation, I'm going to talk about the effect of subgrade on leakage through a defective geomembrane seam below saturated tailings. There are in general three configurations for a geomembrane liners. First, there's the high permeable layer above the geomembrane and a high permeable layer below the geomembrane. This is to simulate the application of geomembrane in water impoundment. Leakage through any geomembrane defect in this application can be predicted with the equation. And in the second application, there's a high permeable layer above the geomembrane and a low permeable layer below the geomembrane. This is to simulate the application of geomembrane in landfill. Leakage through any geomembrane defect in this application can be predicted by Rowe's equation or Giroux's equation. In the last application, there's a low permeable layer above the geomembrane and a high permeable layer below the geomembrane. This is to simulate the application of geomembrane in tailings storage facilities. Leakage through any geomembrane defect in this application was first proposed by Fan and Rowe for the circular hole condition. And the equation was further modified by a more general Rowe and Fan equation for both circular and non-circular hole, especially for the rectangular hole with different aspect ratio. Tailings are the products of crushing and grinding ores. Tailings storage facilities are engineered structures that are constructed to impound tailings slurries. Given the large size and remote location of a tailings storage facility, local native soil is usually used to minimize the construction and haulage cost. And therefore, leakage and piping may be initiated in the embankment and foundation due to the inadequate filter design or construction. Designing and operating a tailings storage facility as a sound engineered structure involves a geomembrane liner system to reduce the leakage from the facility into the surrounding environment and reduce the hydraulic gradient within the embankment so as to increase its stability against failure. Seaming is one of the key elements for the integrity of the geomembrane liners. Based on the field observation, 55% of the damage in exposed geomembrane liners occurred at the seam location. This is because seams are the weakest point of a geomembrane, and therefore many problems arising from that location. Today's presentation, I'm going to focus on two questions. The first one is what's the potential leakage and opening size of a narrow seam defect could be. The second one is what's the difference in the flow and opening mechanism among different defective seams. To answer those two questions, experiments are conducted. And here is a schematic showing the test setup. And we can see that tailings and subgrade are separated by a geomembrane. And for some tests, there is a layer of non-woven needle punch geotextile placed beneath the geomembrane and the protection layer. Total pressure is applied above the rubber blender, and pore pressure is regulated below the rubber blender. And using this configuration, a prescribed stress path simulating the continuing deposition of tailings and build-up of the water head for the submerged tailings can be applied. The tailing examined here is silty sand tailings with 30% fines content. Three different subgrades, a polygraded gravel, a well-graded gravel, and a polygraded sand are examined here. And two types of defective seam are examined. Picture on the left is a slit defect cut by a very sharp blade. This is to simulate the knife cut here and a fusion seam. The second type, picture on the right, is a defective extrusion weld. And we can see that there is a 110 millimeter discontinuous gap between two continuous extrusion fillet weld. The overlap between the top and bottom liners is 85 millimeter. And here's a figure showing the measured leakage. And we can find that for the same subgrade, leakage through the slit defect is greater than leakage through the extrusion welding defect. And also increasing the subgrade unevenness for the well-graded gravel subgrade, there is an increase in leakage. Placing a layer of geotextile protection layer below the geomembrane, there's a reduce in leakage for the polygraded gravel subgrade. And here is the table showing the measured leakage and the loading condition. And the concept of the equivalent opening width introduced here is to simplify the slit defect and a rectangular hole and assume that the hole is filled with fully consolidated tailings. Based on the measured leakage and the row and fence equation, the opening width can be inferred. And we can find that for the polygraded gravel subgrade, the opening width is between 3 and 5 millimeter for the tested loading condition. And for the well-graded gravel, the opening width is between 1.5 and 2 millimeter. And for the polygraded sand subgrade, the opening width is less than 1 millimeter. And also I want to draw your attention for each test with increasing overlying stress, the equivalent opening width increase. And now I'm going to study the impact of the geotextile protection layer on the opening width. Placing a layer of geotextile 1 beneath the polygraded gravel subgrade, the equivalent opening width drops to less than 1 millimeter. This is also true for a much thicker and heavier geotextile 2. Now I'm going to compare the impact of the different seam type on leakage. And we compare for the well-graded gravel subgrade, the equivalent opening width for the slit defect is greater than the opening width for the defective extrusion seam. And this is also true for the polygraded sand subgrade. Summarizing all the data together, we draw this figure. It shows the variation of slit equivalent opening width with the increasing overlying stress for each test. And also summarize that previous figure and some data not present here. We get the empirical equation predicting the equivalent opening width for polygraded gravel, well-graded gravel, and polygraded sand subgrade examined here. And here are 4 figures showing the post-test exhumation of the geomembrane after removing the tailings. And we can find that for the polygraded gravel subgrade and well-graded gravel subgrade, the width of the slit is actually irregularly wider. And for the polygraded sand subgrade, there's no notable slit opening observed. This is because of the differential settlement and the surface irregularity arising from the polygraded gravel and well-graded gravel subgrade. And the subgrade surface irregularity was improved with the presence of more sand-sized particle for the polygraded sand subgrade in test 2 or in test 4. And now we can connect the opening width with the indentation. And based on the publication, the indentation can be reflected by the geomembrane tensile strain. So we present the geomembrane tensile strain here and the reference. And attention should be paid here. The maximum tensile strain is obtained at 2000 kilopascal and published in a separate paper. I want to draw your attention in test 2A with a layer of geotextile protection layer beneath the geomembrane. After removing the tailings, the geomembrane is still in a very intimate contact with the underlying geotextile. And although there's notable indentation in test 2A compared with test 4, the slit equivalent opening width and the measured leakage between test 2A and test 4 are pretty close. This is because in the tailings storage application, with the presence of the geotextile protection layer below the geomembrane, we actually introduced an interface flow, and that interface flow reduce the leakage in tailings storage.
You have 5 minutes.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And here are two figures showing the post-test exhumation of the defective extrusion weld. And we found that the inlet of the weld is filled with fully consolidated tailings. And taking the geomembrane out of the cell, the overlamp was unfolded by hand. And we found that there are some entramped material inside the overlamp. And those material result in the irregularity in the interface flow. Besides that, the irregularity in the overlamp also comes from the subgrade coarseness and subgrade surface irregularity. All those factors result in increasing interface transmissivity with increasing overlying stress. And that's the reason the equivalent opening width for the defective extrusion weld increase with the increasing overlying stress. And here come to the conclusions. Simplifying the slit defect and the rectangular hole, the equivalent opening width increase with the subgrade coarseness, subgrade unevenness, and the overlying stress. Indentations in the overlapped defective extrusion seam area arose due to the entramped material inside the overlap and the material underlying the geomembrane, incrementally inducing a greater interface transmissivity with the increasing overlying stress. And the leakage through a defective extrusion weld within the overlapped geomembrane was substantially less critical than through a slit defect under otherwise similar stress and subgrade conditions. And here are the references for today's presentation. And thanks for your attention. Yeah, I finished my presentation.